I came home from my mother's funeral to a pile of rubble where my house used to stand. No warning, no court order, just a text from my neighbor that said, "Call me now." The HOA had bulldozed my home while I was gone. What they didn't know was who I was about to become. If you believe no homeowner should ever be bullied out of what's rightfully theirs, subscribe to HO. A breakpoint's because every injustice has a breaking point. My name is Dana Whitfield, and for 11 years, 214 Larkspur Lane was mine. I painted the shutters myself. I planted the maple tree in the front yard the week I moved in, back when it was barely taller than me. The Larkspur Ridge Homeowners Association never liked me much. I was the one who asked questions at meetings, the one who filed complaints when they raised dues without a vote. The board president, a man named Gerald Pruitt, once told me with a smile that never touched his eyes that some people just aren't a good fit for this community. I should have listened harder to that sentence. There had been a dispute simmering for months. A boundary line disagreement over a shed I'd built, permitted, inspected, completely legal, that Gerald insisted violated an aesthetic guideline nobody could actually show me in writing. I fought it. I won the first round with the county. I didn't know that losing quietly would have been safer, because 3 weeks later, my mother passed away 4 states over. And I packed a bag in a fog of grief I could barely see through. I was gone 12 days. 12 days of funeral arrangements, of sorting through my mother's things, of forgetting to check my phone because grief doesn't leave room for anything else. On day 9, I got a strange voicemail from an unknown number, something about final notice and structural violation. I remember thinking, that has to be a scam, and deleting it without a second thought. I wish I could go back and listen to that voicemail 20 times. Because while I was hundreds of miles away, standing at a graveside, something was happening back home. Papers were being signed, a crew was being scheduled, and nobody, not one single person from that HOA, picked up a phone to call me directly. What I found out later about that voicemail still makes my stomach turn, but that wasn't even the worst part. I pulled into Larkspur Lane on a Tuesday afternoon, exhausted, running on gas station coffee and 4 hours of sleep total across nearly 2 weeks. The street looked the same. The Petersons' flag was still out. The Chung's sprinklers were still running. Then I turned the corner, and my chest just stopped. Where my house stood, there was nothing. A flattened rectangle of dirt and broken foundation. My maple tree, cut down and hauled off. A single strip of yellow tape flapping against a stake in the ground like some kind of sick decoration. I sat in my car for 11 minutes before I could make my body move. I know it was 11 because I checked the clock obsessively, like counting the minutes would somehow unhappen what I was looking at. My neighbor Rosa ran out before I even got the door open. She was crying harder than I was. They said it was condemned, she told me, hands shaking. They said they tried to reach you. Dana, they had a demolition crew here in 2 days. 2 days. 2 days for a house I'd lived in for 11 years. A house with a legal permitted shed and a dispute that was still technically unresolved with the county. I stood in the dirt where my kitchen used to be, and I made myself one promise. I was going to find out exactly how this happened, and then I was going to make them regret it. The official paperwork was a mess of contradictions. The demolition order cited a structural safety emergency, a classification that, as I'd later learn, requires far less oversight and far fewer notifications than a standard code violation. I hired an attorney. Her name was Melissa Ortiz, and she was the first person who looked at my file and actually got angry on my behalf. This wasn't procedure, she told me. This was a workaround. We requested the HOA's financial records, something every homeowner has a legal right to do. And buried inside 3 years of sloppy bookkeeping was the real story. Larkspur Ridge HOA was drowning in debt. A failed landscaping lawsuit. Mismanaged reserve funds. Gerald Pruitt had personally guaranteed a loan against association property to keep the books from collapsing. My lot, now vacant, now association managed under a technicality buried in the bylaws, had quietly become collateral. They hadn't just bulldozed my house. They'd been planning to absorb my land the entire time. And that's when I realized I wasn't just going to sue them, I was going to buy them. Here's what most people don't know about small, financially unstable HO. As their debt is often sold, packaged, or auctioned sometimes to entities nobody bothers to properly vet. Melissa found the lender holding Gerald's personal loan, the one secured against association-controlled assets, including my lot and 2 others. The lender wanted out. The HOA had missed payments for 4 months straight. I didn't have that kind of money sitting around. But my mother did a modest life insurance policy and a house of her own that I now had to sell anyway. Grief had taken almost everything from me in 1 month. I decided it would also hand me something back. I bought the debt. Not the land, not yet. The debt. The leverage. The exact same kind of quiet legal maneuvering they'd used to seize my lot. Except this time I understood every clause before I signed. Within 60 days, as a direct result of their missed payments and my legal standing as the debt holder, I had the contractual right to place a lien on association-managed common property, the clubhouse, the pool, the very meeting room where Gerald had once told me I wasn't a good fit. I sat with that letter for a full day before I sent it. Then I mailed it certified, requested a special board meeting, and put on the nicest blazer I own. The meeting room smelled exactly like I remembered: burnt coffee and floor polish. Gerald sat at the head of the table, visibly startled to see me. "Dana," he said, forcing a smile. "This is a closed board session." "Not anymore," I said, sliding the paperwork across the table. "I own the loan secured against this building, which means, as of last Thursday, I'm your landlord." The silence in that room was the loudest sound I've ever heard. I watched Gerald's face cycle through disbelief, then panic, then something close to fear as Melissa calmly walked the board through the terms, payment schedules, lien rights, and a clause requiring board approval for any future emergency property decisions to go through me first. "You can't do this," Gerald finally said. "You already did it to me," I said. "I just did it better. And legally." I didn't raise my voice once. I didn't need to. 12 days of grief and 1 bulldozed house had taught me that the coldest kind of justice doesn't shout. But the real ending wasn't in that room. It came 3 weeks later. Gerald resigned from the board within the month. The association, now effectively under my financial oversight, settled my wrongful demolition claim for a figure that covered a full rebuild plus damages. I broke ground on a new house at 214 Larkspur Lane in the spring. I planted a new maple tree, a little bigger this time, in the exact same spot as the one they cut down. Every quarter, the same board that once bulldozed my home without warning has to submit their financial reports to me before a single dollar moves. They never expected the woman they buried under grief and red tape to come back holding the paperwork that owned their pool house. But grief doesn't just take. Sometimes, if you let it, it teaches you exactly how to fight. If you think what happened to Dana could never happen to you, I've got 3 more stories in this series that will change your mind completely. Hit subscribe to HOA Breakpoints, drop a comment with your own HOA horror story, and I'll see you in the next one.